Never underestimate a quiet girl. She isn't lost in thought, she's watching you. I've been told I was shy since before I could understand what the word meant. My mother used to say it like an apology. "Oh, Lauren's just shy," the way you'd explain a broken appliance to a house guest. Nothing to worry about. Just don't expect too much from it. In our house, there were 3 of us kids. Amani was the smart one. Full scholarship to a magnet school at 13, science fair trophies lined up on her dresser like a small army. She spoke in complete, polished sentences, the kind that made adults pull their chins and nod. John was the athletic one, all-conference by sophomore year, colleges calling the house before he'd taken the college entrance exam. He moved through the world with a particular loudness, Jay with volume and confidence. And then there was me, Lauren, the middle one, the quiet one. I wasn't unintelligent. I wasn't unathletic either, not really. I was just between. Too quiet to be remarkable, too steady to be a problem. At family dinners, I sat and listened while Amani talked about her latest academic achievement, and John recounted last week's game, point by point. My parents listened and laughed and asked follow-up questions. When the table turned to me, and it didn't always, I usually said something like school is good or nothing much is going on, which wasn't untrue, but it also wasn't the whole story. The whole story was happening inside my head, 2 days after every conversation ended. That's the thing about being introverted that nobody explains to you when you're young. It's not that you have nothing to say, it's that the words arrive late. Someone would ask me something at dinner, something that deserved a real answer, and my brain would go perfectly, frustratingly blank. I'd say something small and forgettable, but at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, or in the shower, or riding the bus home from school, the perfect answer would materialize, fully formed, elegant, exactly right. And there I'd be, alone, having the best conversation no one would ever hear. School rewarded the fast ones, the ones with their hands up before the teacher finished the question. Class participation was its own kind of performance sport, and I was not a sports person. Any class where participation counted toward the grade, I struggled. English was the worst. My teacher in sophomore year, Mr. Donnelly, had a policy. If you didn't speak at least twice a week, he docked points. I turned in essays that he marked a minus, A, once an A+ with a small note about my lyrical precision, and then he'd hand back participation scores, and I'd see the number and feel the particular humiliation of being penalized for the way I was built. I got B's. Consistent, unremarkable, persistent B's. What I had, and what nobody at home or at school seemed to know what to do with, was endurance. I finished things. I didn't give up on assignments that took too long. I didn't abandon books halfway. I read instructions the whole way through, twice if necessary. When a problem didn't resolve on the first attempt, I sat with it quietly and tried again. My 5th grade teacher actually wrote this on a progress report once. Lauren demonstrates unusual persistence for her age. My mother had thanked her, and that was more or less the end of it. Persistence, it turned out, was not the trait anyone was particularly impressed by. It didn't make a good story at the dinner table, but it would make something else, eventually. I just didn't know that yet. I chose a state university 3 hours from home, close enough to be responsible, far enough to be a different version of myself. I paid for it myself. Not with money I had, with money I found. That was the distinction. Starting junior year of high school, I had spent every free period, every slow Saturday, every evening my siblings were loud and I needed somewhere to put my focus, inside scholarship databases, small ones, obscure ones, the $500 essays that most students didn't bother with because the return didn't seem worth the effort. I bothered. I submitted 41 applications over 2 years. I won 19 of them. By the time I graduated high school, I had covered my first 2 years of tuition without touching a loan. My mother had looked at the spreadsheet I made, tracking deadlines, requirements, award amounts, and said she didn't know you could do that. I hadn't known either until I sat down and looked. Nobody talked about it at dinner the way they talked about Amani's scholarship or John's recruitment offers. It wasn't that kind of achievement. There was no trophy, no ceremony, just a number that balanced and a particular quiet satisfaction I kept to myself. I majored in nonprofit management and nonprofit. I had chosen it the way you choose the right word when you don't know the word you're looking for. I just knew it was right when I saw it. I liked helping people. I was good at research. I was good at finding the quiet, overlooked mechanisms through which institutions moved money. Grants, applications, scholarship databases that other people didn't have the patience to sit with. I would sit with them for hours. My B- GPA at the end of freshman year was a source of private shame that I did not discuss with my family. I knew why. It was the same reason it had always been. Any class with a participation component dragged me down. I had one professor, Dr. Rains, who ran a seminar of 8 students and had opened the first class by saying, with genuine warmth and pride, "I have been teaching for 22 years, and I have never once forgotten a student's name." The second class, he looked right at me and said, "And your name is?" I told him. He nodded and said, of course, in a way that made it clear he had not, in fact, remembered. There were 8 of us in that room. 8. I wasn't even particularly quiet that semester. I had answered questions, contributed to 2 discussions, turned in every assignment on time, and Dr. Rains' 22 years of perfect recall had looked at my face and found nothing there that stuck. I thought about that for a long time afterward, not with bitterness exactly, more like a scientist studying a result they hadn't expected. I was forgettable in a very specific and thorough way. The question I started asking myself, quietly, in that 2 a.m. part of my brain, was what you did with that, whether forgettable was a disadvantage or something else entirely. I started noticing them the second semester of sophomore year. I don't know why it took that long. Maybe I had been too focused on surviving my own invisibility to recognize it in others. But once I saw it everywhere. The invisible ones. The girl in my Introduction to Grant Writing class who always sat at the end of the row and answered questions in a voice that required the professor to say, "I'm sorry," and ask her to repeat herself. The one in the dining hall who ate alone, not because she was sad, but because the social architecture of finding a table, assessing the group, introducing herself, that particular performance, was just too loud an ask on a Tuesday afternoon. The ones who waited for everyone else to board the campus shuttle before stepping on. The ones who laughed at a conversation they weren't quite part of, hovering at the edge, hoping no one noticed that they hadn't been invited in. I recognized the look. A particular negotiation with the world, half watchful, half braced, as though at any moment the situation might turn in an unkind direction. A habit of giving way in doorways, a way of selecting the chair closest to the exit. These were not character flaws, they were strategies. I knew because they were mine. What got to me was how many of them seemed lonely, not all of them. Some had found each other, and you could see the specific relief on their faces when they walked with someone who understood the social pacing they needed, but many were just alone, doing the work, navigating campus, and having no one who quite understood them. I started thinking about what it might look like to gather some of them, not a club, exactly. Nothing formal, nothing with a name on a flyer. The idea of standing at a table in the student activity fair and asking people to sign up made me want to disappear. But something smaller. Something that made sense for who we were. The problem was the thing that always stopped me. I hated rejection with a specific, deep, almost physical aversion. It was one thing to be overlooked. It was another to put myself forward and be turned down. I sat with the idea for weeks and did not act on it. What changed my mind was a girl sitting in a stairwell of Hewitt Hall, trying very hard not to cry. I was cutting through the building after a late library session. It was almost 9 on a Thursday, when I heard the sound. Soft, controlled, the sound of someone who had decided to cry but was determined to take up as little space as possible with it. She was on the second-floor landing, sitting against the wall, her knees pulled in. She was dressed beautifully, a moss-green wrap dress, small gold earrings, her hair done with care. The kind of dress that means you were expecting something of the evening. I stopped. Every social instinct I had said to keep walking. She clearly wanted privacy. I would only make things worse. What would I even say? But I stood there on that landing for what was probably 30 seconds that felt much longer, and then I sat down on the step across from her. She looked up, startled. "Sorry," I said. I didn't want to walk past." She wiped her face quickly. "I'm fine." "Okay," I said. I didn't get up. She looked at me for a moment, then, "They didn't take me." "Who didn't?" "The girls on my floor. We were supposed to go to dinner at Marcello's. Do you know it? The one on 5th? It was Destiny's birthday. I thought I was included." She stopped. "They called an Uber and there wasn't space for me. I said I'd call my own and they just—" She pressed her mouth flat. "They said there probably wasn't room for me at the table either." I sat with that for a second. The specific cruelty of it, not violent, not dramatic, just a quiet closing of a door while someone was still standing there. "I'm Lauren," I said. She looked slightly surprised, like names were not what she'd expected. "Shania, you got all dressed up." "I know. It's stupid." "It's not stupid. They're the stupid ones." She laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because that's what you do when someone is kind to you after something unkind. "I just feel like I always do this to myself. I think I belong somewhere, and then—" She gestured vaguely. I thought about what I'd been turning over for weeks, about the idea that hadn't become anything yet, about the risk of saying it to another person. I didn't say it that night. What I did was sit with her until she was ready to leave the stairwell. We walked out together into the cold and I asked if she'd eaten, and she hadn't. And there was a dining hall still open, and that was that. We sat across from each other for an hour and talked about nothing consequential, her IT work, my grant databases, the particular misery of professors who called on you mid-thought. She laughed twice, genuinely. I walked back to my dorm feeling something I didn't have a name for yet. We started texting. Not constantly, neither of us were constant texters, but steadily, the way two people do when they've silently agreed there's something worth continuing. We got coffee once, and then dinner once, and then coffee again. She showed me a campus tech system she'd figured out how to navigate in ways the manual didn't cover. I showed her a scholarship database that most students didn't know existed, and watched her eyes move across it the way mine did when something opened up. 3 weeks in, she said, "You always look like you're thinking about something you're not saying." I laughed. She wasn't wrong. We were sitting in the same dining hall where we'd eaten that first night, and the thought had been sitting in my chest the whole meal, same as always. The idea that hadn't become anything, the risk of naming it out loud. "What if I told you I've been thinking about starting something?" I said. "Not an official group, nothing where you have to sign a form, just some of us finding each other. Shy girls, overlooked girls. Not to fix it, exactly, but just so we have people." Shania looked at me with an expression I would learn to recognize over the next few years. A careful hopefulness. The look of someone who wanted to believe, but had been disappointed before. "What would we do?" she asked. "I don't know exactly," I said. "Get together, maybe. Find a few more people like us. Eat somewhere. Just exist in a room without having to perform." She was quiet for a moment. "That's it?" "That's it. For now." Lisa came third. Shania had mentioned her, a girl she knew from a gen ed sociology class who was quiet, but had some connection to the athletic world through her residency in one of the athletic dorms her first year. Lisa was from Missouri, tall, the kind of physically capable that might have made her a jock if she'd wanted to be. She hadn't particularly wanted to be. She was shy in the way some tall people are shy, aware of taking up space and made self-conscious by it, often holding herself slightly smaller than she was. What Lisa had was something none of us had: access. She wasn't part of the jock social world, but she'd lived adjacent to it long enough to know how it worked, who was connected to whom, what the Whisper network looked like. She knew things without trying to know them, the natural result of being present in rooms without people quite noticing her. She also had an extraordinarily soft heart. She volunteered every other Saturday at the county animal shelter, and her face when she held a kitten was the most unguarded you'd ever see her. When Shania and I asked if she wanted to be part of what we were building, she said, "What exactly are you building?" "Something quiet," I said. Something where you matter, and no one's going to talk over you. She said yes before I'd finished the sentence. We grew carefully, the way you do when you know that the wrong person changes the chemistry. Over the following semester, Shania, Lisa, and I each brought in one more person, vetted the same way. Someone we'd watched, someone whose skills and character we understood, someone who would fit the particular kind of quiet competence we were building toward. Michelle was pre-law, working toward criminal justice, and she understood systems, specifically how institutions moved when they wanted to bury something. She had an aunt who was a paralegal, and she had been listening to case stories since she was 12. She had a clear, cold memory for legal procedure and a very low tolerance for people who used money to make problems disappear. Tasha was in electrical engineering, rigorous, exacting, the kind of person who triple-checked her work because she understood consequences. She had a careful relationship with the rules, meaning she knew exactly where the rules were before she decided how she felt about approaching the edges of them. Gina was pre-med, specifically interested in psychiatry. She read people with a clinical patience, not coldly, but with a precision that was useful when we needed to understand motivation. And Andrea was in business administration, specifically concentrations in organizational behavior and finance. She understood how institutions protected themselves and where the pressure points were. 7 of us. We didn't have a name. We didn't have a charter. We had a WhatsApp group with disappearing messages set to 24 hours and a standing loose arrangement to get together every other week. Whoever was free, no obligation, no roll call. We discovered new restaurants, which was my contribution to the agenda. Shania once got us half-price symphony tickets through a student government connection. Lisa would send a message on Saturdays saying she was going to the shelter if anyone wanted to come, and usually at least 3 of us showed up to sit with cats and not be required to make conversation. In that group, none of us were the quiet ones. We were just people. We knew what each other had, and we trusted it. We didn't plan to become what we became. It happened the way most things happened in our group because Lisa knew something. It was a Sunday evening at her apartment. She was, it emerged gradually, quietly, from money, the kind of family that didn't announce it, and she had made enough pasta for all 7 of us, which was typical of her, and we were eating and talking in the easy way we'd learned to talk with each other when Lisa said, "I need to tell you all something about Maria." The name registered on a few faces. Shania looked up from her bowl. "What happened to her?" Gina asked. "You know Alec Pemberton?" Lisa asked. A general acknowledgement. We all knew Alec Pemberton, at least by reputation, a junior on the men's lacrosse team, broad-shouldered, the kind of handsome that caused people to rearrange themselves around him when he walked into a room, the kind of person who had been given everything easily enough that he treated it as his natural state. Alec had been talking to Maria for a couple of weeks, Lisa said. Texting, running into her on purpose, the whole thing. She thought he was genuinely interested, and he kind of was, just not in the way she thought. She set her fork down. He asked her if she wanted to see where he lived off campus, and she went. A pause. When she got there was a group of his friends, and he had apparently been describing her physically to these friends in very specific and very degrading terms, and had made a bet about whether she'd actually show up. And when she walked in, they all started. Lisa stopped. They laughed, all of them, at her, for walking through the door. The table was quiet. He was filming it, Shania said flatly. The video didn't go anywhere. But she didn't know that at first. She left. She just walked out. And Alec and his friends thought it was... Apparently they thought it was hilarious. A whole joke. She missed almost 2 weeks of classes after that. Full online sessions only. Wouldn't go to campus. Has she reported it? Michelle asked. Her voice was the calm one, the legal one. Information gathering. She went to the Title IX office. They said that unless there was video evidence distributed or explicit quid pro quo, there wasn't much to investigate. It was, as they apparently told her, a social situation gone wrong. Lisa's jaw was tight. His family gives money to this school. His father has his name on the east wing of the communications building. The school isn't going to touch him." "What has he said about it?" Gina asked. "He's told people it was a prank, that she didn't get the joke, that she was too sensitive." Lisa looked around the table. "This is not the first time he's done something like this. I know at least 2 other stories. One was freshman year and the family just—" She gestured, fingers spreading. "Gone. Made it go away." Shania had been quiet through this. She had a way of going very still when something had clicked in her mind. You could almost see it. "He's in student government," she said. "Social chair," Lisa confirmed. "And he's been brought up before." "Officially?" Michelle asked. "At least twice that I know of." Michelle nodded slowly, the nod of someone who had expected this. "And his father's contributions erased them?" "That's the story." We were all quiet for a moment. The pasta was getting cold. Nobody was eating. I said, "What would embarrass him?" "Not a question, a direction." "Embarrass him publicly," Andrea said. "You need to go after things he cares about, his friendships, his reputation with specific people, his image as someone who gets away with everything." "His girlfriend doesn't know about the other girls," Lisa said. "I know that for certain." "How many?" Gina asked. "At least 3 he's actively been running at the same time as her. That's just what I know." Tasha, who had been quiet for almost the entire conversation, said, "I might be able to find things. I'm not saying I will. I'm saying I might be able to. If there are disciplinary records in the university system, they're in a database. Databases have vulnerabilities." She met our eyes one by one, evenly. "I need to think about whether I want to cross that line." Nobody told her what to decide. That was one of the things about our group. We didn't pressure each other. "In the meantime," Shania said, "there's plenty that doesn't require anything like that. Social media presence going back 3 years, friends who might know things and might be persuaded to share them, and I know people in the registrar's office." She paused. "I know someone who knows someone." Michelle leaned back in her chair. "If there are formal disciplinary records, even sealed ones, and if there was any misconduct in the process by which they were dismissed, that becomes a different kind of story, institutionally speaking." "Then we start there," I said. "We watch. We gather. We don't move until we know exactly what we have." It was the most I'd said at once in a long time. Nobody disagreed. What followed was 6 methodical weeks. We all had a skill, something that we were quietly good at. What was the use of having it if we didn't use it to help? That was how it started, with 7 shy girls. Lisa used her access to the athletic world quietly. She asked casual questions the way you ask about the weather, mentioned Alec's name into conversations the way you'd mention a name you'd heard on the radio. What came back surprised even her. 2 more incidents, a freshman girl who had left school mid-semester sophomore year for personal reasons that turned out to be connected to a particular Alec Pemberton situation, a graduate student in the athletic department who had been involved in the original disciplinary filing and had described the process, privately, as handled from above. Michelle worked her networks in the criminal justice department and found something interesting. Alec's record from his private high school, sealed, but not sealed the way people assumed. There had been a harassment complaint from a female student. Settled privately. Non-disclosure. His family had paid for his acceptance to this university in the specific and elegant way that the wealthy paid for things: a building, a lecture hall, an endowed position. Shania found the disciplinary files. She didn't say exactly how. She said only that she had been careful and that she was confident no trail led back to her, and we had learned to trust her assessment of her own work. The files told the story Michelle had already suspected: 2 formal complaints, both dismissed within weeks of large institutional donations. The process had worked exactly as designed, which is to say, it had not worked at all. Tasha found the exam. She had been reluctant, which was correct. She spent 2 weeks thinking before she moved. What she found was a recording Alec had made, intended for a friend's private Snapchat. in which he described in fairly explicit terms how he had obtained advance answers to the midterm in History 204 from someone who had access to the testing materials. He described it as not even that hard and said that the course was for students who couldn't figure out the system. He had not expected the recording to go anywhere. Most recordings don't. Tasha transferred it to a format she could distribute without identifiable metadata and gave it to me. I held it for another week. We moved in pieces, never all at once. First, the girlfriend received a note. Not from any of us, technically, but from what looked like a concerned mutual acquaintance, with enough specific detail about one of the other girls to make it undeniable. The detail was accurate. The girlfriend's subsequent discovery of the other two happened largely on her own, because once you know to look, the pattern is not hard to find. Then Alec's best friend, Devin, a quiet, decent person who had always seemed slightly out of his depth in Alec's orbit, received information about something Alec had said about Devin's younger sister. The sister was a sophomore who had visited campus the previous fall. Alec had been discussing her, in terms we found in the same sphere as where we'd found Maria's story. Devin had not known. Devin and Alec's friendship ended in a confrontation outside the lacrosse building that several people witnessed, but none of us arranged. Then the recording. It was shared first on a small anonymous forum, then picked up by a campus gossip account, then shared 300 times before Alec knew it was circulating. By the time he understood the shape of what was happening, it was too late to contain it. The history professor filed an academic integrity complaint. The university had no choice but to respond. With Alec suddenly no longer protected by the social infrastructure of a unified friend group and an institutional relationship that preferred not to look closely, the process moved at a different speed than it had before. Academic probation, removal from the student government social chair position, mandatory integrity seminar. Not enough. We knew that. Maria knew that. But somewhere between the lawsuit and the audit and the letters, something had shifted. Justice had found its way in, quiet and unannounced, the way it sometimes does when you stop waiting for it. The truth has a way of catching up without asking permission. By the time Maria understood what had been set in motion, it was already done. Justice doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes you just notice one day that the wait is gone. But Alec Pemberton would not go through his remaining time at this university the same way he had gone through the first 3 years, that we could ensure. And then we kept our eyes open, because it turned out that Alec Pemberton was not a singular problem. He was just the most visible one. There was a student named Daniel, brilliantly gifted, autistic, in his 3rd year of computer science. Daniel had wanted, with a specificity that was almost heartbreaking, one friend. One person who wanted to spend time with him because they enjoyed his company. He had put flyers up for a study group, carefully designed, color-coded. A group of 4 students had responded. For 2 months, Daniel had done their assignments, explained their problems, written their code, genuinely delighted to be needed. He had thought this was friendship, the exchange of help for company. He hadn't understood yet what they were taking from him. Gina had noticed Daniel in the library. She'd watched the pattern for 3 weeks before she told us. What happened to that study group was quiet and efficient. Michelle found that 2 of the 4 had previous academic integrity flags in their files. Shania found evidence of the arrangement in a group chat one of them had been careless about on a shared university platform. 3 of the 4 faced academic integrity reviews. The 4th, the one who had spoken the kindest to Daniel, was simply cut out of the social arrangement that had made it appealing. He folded without assistance. Daniel eventually found a Discord community of other computer science students who were, in their various ways, neurodivergent like him. He did not know that the people who had been using him had been removed from his orbit with any help. He thought they had simply moved on. That was fine. He didn't need to know. The other situation was harder to watch. Her name was Priya. She lived in Caldwell Hall, and her roommate, a girl named Courtney with a rotating audience of friends, had made Priya's room into a performance space for a particular kind of cruelty, the kind that left no marks. Jokes about the way Priya dressed, comments about her accent, friends asking her questions they already knew the answers to, waiting for her to speak, and then exchanging looks. Priya's things moved. Priya's belongings commented upon. Priya, who said nothing, who endured it, who had not complained to the RA because she was afraid of making it worse. Andrea handled the practical angles. She documented 3 lease terms, found the clauses around hostile living environments, and built the case for a formal room reassignment request in terms that were difficult for housing to dismiss. Michelle provided the framing that made it less a complaint and more a policy matter. Shania found that Courtney had posted publicly, not about Priya directly, but with enough identifiable detail that a careful reader could connect it, and archived those posts before anything could be deleted. Priya got a new room. Courtney received a formal warning and a notation in her conduct file. Her friends, finding that the audience had been removed, dispersed. We never introduced ourselves to Priya. She didn't know us. Most of the people we helped didn't know us. That was, as it turned out, precisely the point. This is what I've learned about being quiet. People underestimate quiet the way they underestimate endurance, as if the absence of noise means the absence of power. What they don't understand is that quiet is a posture, not a condition. You can be quiet and still be watching every movement in the room. You can be quiet and be building something patient and deliberate and very hard to dismantle. I still walk into rooms and wait for people to finish first. I still compose my best responses in the shower, 40 hours too late for the conversation. Dr. Rains still would not remember my name if I walked back into his office tomorrow. None of that has changed. What has changed is what I know about 7 women who could not get a word in edgewise, who were overlooked in classrooms and left off guest lists and cried in stairwells in beautiful dresses, who walked through the world a little braced and a little watchful, and who, together, became something that no one in their right mind would have predicted from the outside. There is a student named Jordan right now, a junior, who is being squeezed out of a research project he designed by a professor who intends to publish under his own name alone. We are in the information-gathering phase. Michelle has looked at the relevant intellectual property clauses in the student research agreement Jordan signed. Tasha has thoughts about the metadata on the shared document. Shania knows someone who was a graduate student under this professor before and left under circumstances that were never fully explained. We are patient. We are thorough. We are not in a hurry. The quiet ones never are. We'll keep watching. And we'll keep going. And one day, when someone asks who's been quietly running things in the background, restoring what was taken, correcting what couldn't be corrected by the people paid to correct it, no one will know where to look. That's exactly how we like it. But we're not done. There are others like Maria, other names in other folders, other women who signed things they shouldn't have signed, who trusted people who counted on that trust to take everything. We know how to find them now. We know what to do when we do. And the people who think they got away clean, they haven't checked their mail yet. We will remember every name, every amount, every person who smiled at the right moment and disappeared before the damage showed. We have time, we have patience, and we have absolutely nothing left to lose by being thorough.
I developed this story and I used AI to do the narration. If you enjoyed this story, I would really appreciate it if you click like and subscribe. Thank you.